Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's good to see so many great faces. Some I've had the pleasure of working with, and some I hope to get to work with later on. I will start by saying that has got to be the toughest follow-up gig that I'm going to have, but thank you, Keith, that was great. So, my name is Olu. As you can see, I work for Cisco. I wear the badge with pride. A little bit about me outside of my job title, which is obviously Network Consulting Engineer. Music, I love it, all day, every day. Gym, football, squash, sports in general, I love it. Staying active is always, it's always been a big part of my life. I tend to keep it that way. Fun fact, I'm also obsessed with the color purple. Don't ask me why, don't ask me how. It's just the way things have kind of worked out. Any McLaren fans in the house? Don't be shy. I see a couple. Well, yeah, nothing to do with work, but as a true Cisconian, I have to, of course, support the team that won the championship last year. So from a Wi-Fi perspective, who am I? Well, I'm a wireless consulting engineer, so I do surveys in a variety of places, a variety of verticals, all across the country. Starting from left to right, you can see I'm outside a stadium, it's raining, somewhere in the north, but we made sure we got that data. There's another stadium there with a 9179F up at about 6 meters in that picture, and I'll touch a bit more on that later. Standard enterprise office environment, well, they were still building it, hence the PPE, but shipping port as well, so outdoors, again, cold, but equally important in terms of making sure the Wi-Fi works. And finally, in hospitals. One thing that working in the Wi-Fi industry for the last 6 or so years now has kind of taught me is that we're in a situation where the difference between the Wi-Fi working and not working can vary between a slight inconvenience and quite literally life and death. So that is not to be self-important, but it is to highlight the criticality of designing and deploying Wi-Fi well. So I wanted to start out with a question for the audience, and please shout out. What does everyone think is the most important skill for a wireless engineer to have? Patience. Yes, definitely patience. Any technical skills that people think are kind of up there?
Patience.
Yeah, patience again. Okay, so I'll be honest, I was expecting someone to say like packet analysis and all that kind of stuff. But yes, I wanted to pick out 3 that I think are really, really important. So we're trusted advisors, and especially in my role as a consulting engineer, I'm presented with situations where clients, customers don't necessarily always have wireless expertise. But the point about being assertive is that by instilling confidence in the users and the end users, and your stakeholders around the fallibility of the solution, the security of the solution, we can improve the experience for everybody, as a person deploying and for the person that's receiving the service. Inquisitive. I think we've heard many great presentations today. I think the key thing about being inquisitive, and I'm sure someone touched on it earlier, is asking the right questions in the context of the customer that you're working with. Having someone call you and say, oh, there's a Wi-Fi problem, you could end up going down a path which actually the DNS server stopped responding to requests 20 minutes ago, but no one checked that it was a Wi-Fi issue. So asking the right questions can get you to the right solution quicker. And accountable. When I talk to customers and they ask, what speeds can we expect? What exactly are the, what exactly are the number of clients I can have? I need to be accountable for what I say in that moment. Because if I say you can have 300 clients connected to this network, and they get to 250 and the thing falls over, you lose that confidence, you lose that status as trusted advisor. So by being accountable for the things that you say and the promises that you make, you can really get yourself into a really great position as a wireless engineer. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of stakeholders and the kind of roles that they play in the context of stadiums. So typically, I get to site, I'm doing a stadium design, and I speak to this guy. This person is telling me, I'm interested in making sure that my clients have X amount of throughput. They might be interested in RSSI values. They might be interested in SNR values. All of those kind of technical nitty-gritty bits that make up the Wi-Fi solution, this person is definitely interested in. Increasingly, and especially in the stadium context, what we're now finding as engineers is that we're being asked to speak to this person. Now, I don't have an MBA, and I didn't go to business school, but I am being tasked with having conversations with someone who isn't technical, but is more interested in things like EBITDA, I think they call it, and something called return on investment. And so, as someone who designs and has been involved in designing stadiums, I've had to start talking about things like this: visitor safety, wayfinding, in-seat ordering. All of these are capabilities which are revenue-generating opportunities for the end user. And I think a key point to highlight here is that actually, in the process of proposing a solution, we need to start talking more about what the Wi-Fi enables as opposed to what it is. Wi-Fi is no longer just the product, it's an enabler. That's the world we live in, and with Wi-Fi 7, and I'm sure for those, I'm sure lots of you know, but for those that don't, in Wi-Fi 7 access points now, in the 9178s and 76s and such, we have UWB. That opens a whole new realm of possibilities for what we can deliver as a service via our wireless infrastructure. So, a little bit about stadiums and deploying stadiums. First thing I need to highlight at any junction when I talk about this is safety is key. As you can see here, we've got our tripod again, roughly 6 to 7 meters up in here, and we've actually tied it down. Now, you think, why is that important? Well, actually, at that height, with a 9179 and a bracket, you're at like 6.3 kilograms. Imagine the force of that coming down in a changing weather condition. That hitting someone and that hitting some kind of infrastructure, it's actually quite dangerous. So I do implore you, if you are deploying wireless in places like stadiums or even exhibition halls and things like that, please do be wary about the safety of it. And there's some other points there as well, which you can see. Using the tools to your advantage. So, and I'll show a couple of stats from a recent stadium survey that we did. But actually, we don't have to do every square inch anymore. We're now in a situation where, thanks to Echout and the tools that you've given us, we're able to do things like model in 3D. And as you can see here, I've just modeled up very, very quickly, and that brings me on to one thing. I'm very excited for the auto stairs, because doing this across the whole stadium would take quite some time in its current form, right? So it's very important to use the tools effectively. I think when I first got introduced into Echout, it was no dark mode and there was no AI in the title. And doing something like this was way beyond the imagination at that point in time. But now that we have these capabilities, it's important as wireless engineers and professionals that we use them so that we can be efficient. Efficiency in the context of stadiums is everything, because as I said, these places are huge. They're 80,000, 60,000 seats. You don't have enough time to do a full AP on a stick of every single AP. So use the tools as effectively as they can be. Laser measures, super, super important. The reason I say that, and I'll come on to this a little bit, it goes back to what Vasilius was saying about the documentation that you provide. In the stadiums, it's no longer just generic, place it on the ceiling, walk away. We've got angles, and in the case of the 9179, we've also got orientation. Landscape versus portrait makes a big difference. We have, in the 9179, we have what we call bore sight and we have wide. And depending on the orientation, so if it's landscape like an A4 sheet of, portrait, sorry, like an A4 sheet of paper, the way that signal propagates across 40, 50, 60 meters changes quite drastically depending on its orientation. We have tilt angle. We have tilt angles in all three orientations. So again, having a laser measure and your ability to measure the angle of the AP, the distances of the AP, not only makes your survey better, but it makes your documentation better and the end result better for everyone else. Here's a screenshot from A football game, I can't tell you which one, but it was a football game. We were tasked with understanding what does the environment look like during a game, during an event when people are meant to be consuming whatever it is that's happening. What does the 5 gigahertz look like? And the reason this is important is because in stadium deployments, using AI RRM, as much as I love it, and I'm a big advocate, I will talk to you all night about that if you let me, it's not always the most effective in a stadium environment. Reasons being, obviously, AI RRM relies on AP to AP relationships, and in a big open bowl where every AP can effectively hear every other AP, it's not always going to be able to make the best decisions. Another reason this is important, actually, is because we have seen in some situations people from the media, have cameras that have wireless transmitters, and they don't just operate necessarily in 2.4 or 5, they may even operate in 6. Now, you might not see that unless you understand the RF spectrum in the environment, and that way you can make a channel plan which can avoid that, those frequencies in particular. Directional antennas for the win. I think that's the understatement of the century when it comes to stadium design, but for those that don't know, directional antennas are absolutely the way. Obviously, we at Cisco have the 9179F, as I've mentioned, but we also have the 9176D1, which, when used effectively, can be a very good tool for Wi-Fi design in stadiums. Reason being is that, depending on the mounting locations and the restrictions that you have, you may need to do what we call infill. Now, that infill may be in such a spot that using a 9179F is not practical. But actually, and probably the bigger reason that we don't necessarily use 9179F stadium access points everywhere is cost. Let's be very honest with ourselves. These things are expensive, and the 9176D1 can drastically help to reduce the cost whilst maintaining that directionality and the good design and coverage. And don't be afraid to get inventive. If they haven't said you can't mount there, assume that you can. Be prepared. Have your waters, your foods, your cereal bars, your Red Bulls, whatever you need. As you can see, this is just part of a stadium survey. You'll notice that I haven't put any of the actual stands, but from the stats you can see it's over 3 hours, 5-point-something kilometers, very different to the survey that Natilik was showing you. And it's very important that you have that in mind when you're scoping a project or when you're looking at doing a project. These things can take time. And by the way, this doesn't include the time it takes to carry the access point, set it up, make sure it's lifted correctly, make sure it's secured. You add that time in, and all of a sudden it really starts to snowball. So when you are budgeting and scoping stadium design projects, please bear that in mind. So to kind of close out, I want to show you guys what we call the immutable laws of Wi-Fi. I'm sure you'll relate to some of them. Let's just leave it at that. First one. Coverage is not capacity. I mean, I don't need to reiterate that. You guys have heard it from some of the speakers before me today, but yeah, 4 bars does not mean good quality of service. Yes, it's always the Wi-Fi. I think that's a steadfast rule amongst the wireless community. The less said about that, the better, actually, because that's triggering me a little bit. I've had way too many arguments with way too many people about that. I'm sure that wall was there 2 years ago. I'm sure it was. Yeah. It's an interesting one, but I think it is somewhat true. I think, is the cable plugged in, yes or no? Yeah. Okay, you can see the cable if the cable's cut, if it's snipped, if it's got too tight of a bend in it. I think from a layer 1 perspective, the fact that the waves that we're fighting with are invisible just adds a layer of complexity. I'm not saying I'm better than my wired counterparts, but, Yep. Still, to this day, it still seems to be the case, but again, we're trying to change the tide, and I think by looking around, I think we're really starting to appreciate that within the networking community as a whole, so that's great to see. I'm really glad that in AI Pro Online, I can now model the changes without having to go to site and physically put up an access point. Because when someone suggests something stupid like moving it into the corner office, away and behind all of this cool reflective glass that has unique RF characteristics, I can explain to them exactly why that's a terrible idea. Yeah, with Wi-Fi 7, 320 megahertz wide. Yeah, let's do it. Great. Yeah, I've had some fun with this one, but definitely doesn't make sense in a lot of high-density deployments. Matt, you touched on this earlier. It's my everyday.
That's because you're so interesting.
Oh, don't. Stop it. Stop it. Why is it better, faster at home? Mac, you know this. You can do whatever you want at home. You've got 1, maybe 2 access points, you're good to go. Slightly different in high density. This has happened a couple of times, and for the sake of keeping my job, I decided not to quit back about how, tax consultants just look at spreadsheets all day and things like that. It doesn't get you anywhere, but shows here that the AP isn't up. But we test. I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. Yeah. We are getting better with 6 gig, but even then. And finally, we are bound by physics. I think we've spoken a lot today about Wi-Fi in various ways, and I think ultimately what it comes down to is whether it's concrete, drywall, free space, there is some loss attributed with the signal that you receive compared to the signal that was the strength of the signal at the point it was transmitted. So yeah, I've used this one a few times. It's a get out of jail free card, and yeah, feel free to use it from here on out. I wanted to finish with a little anecdote. So, as I mentioned, I'm kind of...
Actually, if there was a client connected, it was blue.
Precisely. Precisely. So, I wanted to just finish off with a little anecdote. Like I said, I'm only 6 years into the wireless industry, so I'm relatively new to this whole scene. But there was a time, and I believe somebody in this room was also there, where I was chucked into a situation where the Wi-Fi wasn't working, and of course I turned up to site, I've got my sidekick, we're doing troubleshooting, and I get a message from a manager, and he says, the CIO wants to see you. I've been doing Wi-Fi for 2 years. I'm not sure you want me to sit in front of the CIO, but it is what it is. You're there as the vendor especially to kind of demonstrate that confidence in the solution and provide the right outcomes for the customer. So I go and sit in with the meeting with the CIO. I'm glad to report I kept my job after that meeting because I'm still at Cisco, right? But what was it about me in that moment in time that enabled me to walk into the lion's den, quote unquote, and come out unscathed? I guarantee you it wasn't my technical skills. Whilst I knew what I was doing, I'm no CCIE, right? I'll be completely honest about that. What did get me through was my ability to read the situation, understand the context of what exactly were the pain points for the CIO at that point in time, being inquisitive, asking the right questions, being assertive as well, as I kind of mentioned at the start, right? I was able to, without going into great technical details, I was able to give the customer that feeling of, okay, we'll be okay, we'll get through this, we'll work this out, by being assertive, by being accountable for what I said and delivering it, and also, like I say, by being inquisitive. That's it from me. Just wanted to say a huge thank you and enjoy the rest of the day.